3 armed men crashed through the warehouse doors just as the city's most feared Mafia Boss pulled the trigger without hesitation. The gunfight erupted so violently that even veteran capos dove for cover. Amid the chaos, one terrified Curvy woman swung her oversized handbag straight into a masked attacker's face before screaming, "Wrong person! You kidnapped the wrong woman!" Silence followed for exactly 1 second. Then every soldier turned toward their boss. For the first time in years, Rafael De Luca realized his flawless operation had gone catastrophically wrong. The frightened woman standing in front of him wasn't a spy. She was an ordinary elementary school cafeteria manager who had absolutely no idea why 2 mafia empires were suddenly fighting over her. The explosion of automatic gunfire rolled across the abandoned shipping warehouse like thunder, trapped inside concrete walls. Bullets shredded wooden crates. Dust drifted through broken skylights. Spent shell casings bounced across the floor with metallic echoes. Rafael De Luca never flinched. His charcoal black suit remained immaculate despite the chaos surrounding him. Every movement was calm, every command precise. North entrance. 2 soldiers immediately shifted positions. Roof. A hidden sniper disappeared before he could squeeze the trigger again. Secure the package. 3 armed guards instinctively formed a protective circle around the frightened woman standing near the loading dock. Madison Brooks had never been more confused in her life. Only 30 minutes earlier, she had been finishing inventory at Jefferson Elementary School. She had spent nearly an hour arguing with a supplier over frozen chicken nuggets. Her biggest concern had been whether the cafeteria would have enough apples for Friday's lunches. Now strangers carrying assault rifles were risking their lives to protect her. Or kidnap her? Honestly, she wasn't entirely sure which. Her wrists were secured with plastic zip ties. Someone had pushed her into an armored SUV. Another man had politely apologized while doing it. The apology somehow made everything even stranger. She looked around wildly. "I think you've made a mistake." Nobody answered. "I don't even know any criminals." Still nothing. One soldier briefly glanced toward her before returning fire. Another muttered, "Please keep your head down, Mom." Mom? She was being kidnapped. Politely. A masked attacker suddenly burst from behind a stack of shipping containers and rushed directly toward her. Madison's heart nearly stopped. She reacted without thinking. Her oversized leather handbag swung through the air with surprising force. The heavy bag slammed directly into the attacker's face. His mask twisted sideways. He stumbled backward into another gunman. Both men crashed through a pile of wooden pallets. The entire warehouse froze. Madison blinked. She looked at the handbag in disbelief. "Did I just hit him?" One of the De Luca soldiers stared at her. "So did I," he whispered. Another soldier coughed, desperately trying not to laugh. The moment lasted less than a heartbeat. More gunfire erupted. Raphael stepped forward without hesitation. 2 perfectly controlled shots. 2 attackers collapsed. The remaining gunman retreated toward the rear loading docks before disappearing into the darkness. Silence slowly settled over the warehouse. Only damaged electrical wires continued crackling overhead. Several wounded men groaned nearby. Smoke drifted lazily through shattered windows. One of Raphael's senior capos approached, carrying a black aluminum briefcase. We recovered it. Raphael accepted the case without looking away from Madison. "Verify the contents." The capo unlocked it. Everyone leaned closer. Instead of encrypted hard drives, instead of financial ledgers, instead of classified documents, inside sat neatly folded paperwork, a lunch planner, school invoices, children's allergy reports, color-coded cafeteria menus. Someone quietly cleared his throat. Another soldier slowly closed his eyes. The warehouse became strangely silent. Madison cautiously raised one hand. Those are mine. Nobody moved. Their meal schedules. Still nothing. I spent 3 hours organizing them. One capo looked toward another. Another looked toward Raphael. Finally, the oldest advisor spoke. "Boss." His voice sounded unusually careful. "I don't believe rival mafia organizations prepare balanced nutrition plans for elementary schools." No one laughed. Because no one dared. Raphael slowly opened one folder. Across the top of the page were handwritten words. Friday pizza day below that. Recommendations for increasing vegetable consumption among second graders. He turned another page. Emergency contact numbers. Food allergy lists. Volunteer schedules. Nothing remotely connected to organized crime. Madison swallowed. "So," she forced an awkward smile. "I'm guessing. I'm probably not the international financial courier you're looking for." For perhaps the first time in nearly 15 years, nobody inside the DeLuca organization knew what to say. Raphael closed the folder. His expression remained unreadable. But every experienced capo recognized the warning signs. Their boss had just realized something impossible. His intelligence network, his surveillance team, his entire operation had kidnapped the wrong woman. And somewhere across the city, the people they were actually hunting still possessed the information capable of destroying both mafia empires. Worse still, if Vincent Gallo learned what had happened, this harmless cafeteria manager would become valuable simply because everyone believed she knew something. Whether she actually did would no longer matter. No one spoke for nearly 20 seconds. Inside the warehouse, silence felt far more dangerous than the gunfire had. Every man present understood exactly what had happened. The DeLuca family had planned the operation for nearly 3 weeks. Their surveillance team had tracked a female courier believed to be carrying encrypted financial records capable of exposing Vincent Gallo's offshore accounts, bribed officials, and hidden weapon routes. The woman had been observed leaving the same commercial district every Thursday evening. She always carried a large leather bag. She drove the same gray sedan. She followed the exact same route. Everything had matched. Everything, except the woman. One intelligence officer slowly removed his earpiece. His face had turned pale. "Boss." He hesitated. "Our surveillance photos," he swallowed, "were taken from across the street." Raffaele looked at him. The man immediately wished he hadn't spoken. Another advisor hurried over carrying a tablet. "We're checking traffic cameras." His fingers flew across the screen. The warehouse remained eerily quiet. Finally, he stopped. His expression collapsed. "We have visual confirmation." Everyone waited. The actual courier left the building 6 minutes after Miss Brooks. Another silence. Their coats were nearly identical. Madison blinked. "My cardigan caused all of this?" The advisor nodded weakly. "You both carried oversized bags." She looked down at her beige cardigan. "I bought this because it was on sale." No one knew how to respond. One younger soldier whispered under his breath, "We almost started a gang war over department store discounts." The older capo beside him elbowed him sharply. "Not now. But definitely not now." For a brief moment, Madison forgot she had been kidnapped. She looked around the warehouse, then quietly asked, "So, does this mean I can go home?" Every experienced mafioso avoided looking at her. Raffaele finally answered, "No." The single word landed like a stone. Madison's hopeful smile disappeared. "I understand you're frightened." His voice remained calm. "But releasing you now would likely get you killed." She frowned. "I work in a school cafeteria. I've never even had a speeding ticket. What possible reason would anyone have to hurt me?" The oldest capo sighed. "Because they think you know something. I don't. They won't believe that." Madison opened her mouth. closed it again, opened it once more. I literally know chicken casserole recipes. They'll assume you're lying. I know how to remove ketchup stains. They'll think it's code. I alphabetize canned vegetables. They'll probably assume that's code too. Several soldiers looked down to hide reluctant smiles. Even in the middle of disaster, this woman somehow kept making people want to laugh. Raffaele noticed. He wasn't amused. He was analyzing. Most civilians reacted to danger with panic. Some froze. Others screamed. Madison did something entirely different. She talked. Constantly. Not because she enjoyed hearing herself speak. Because speaking seemed to steady her heartbeat. Interesting. The observation lodged quietly in his mind. One of the security officers interrupted. We intercepted radio traffic. Everyone focused on him. Gallows people believe we successfully extracted the courier. Another pause. They're mobilizing. Estimated response? Less than an hour. The warehouse suddenly felt much smaller. One advisor spoke carefully. If they believe she has the records, he glanced toward Madison. They'll never stop hunting her. Another capo nodded. They'll watch her apartment, her workplace. Anyone she speaks to. They'll assume she's hiding evidence. Madison slowly raised one tied hand. Question. The room turned toward her. If I explain I'm just responsible for school lunches. No one answered. She sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. 40 minutes later, a convoy of armored SUVs left the warehouse under heavy escort. Madison sat in the middle vehicle. 2 soldiers occupied the seats beside her. Neither looked older than 30. Both carried rifles almost as long as their legs. The silence became unbearable. So, neither man responded. My name's Madison. Still silence. I make excellent macaroni and cheese. Nothing. I also bake cinnamon rolls. The soldier nearest the window finally glanced toward her. My grandmother used to bake cinnamon rolls. His partner immediately frowned. Don't encourage conversation. I'm just saying. No. Madison smiled gently. I promise I'm not trying to escape. I actually get carsick. Both soldiers looked confused. What? In armored vehicles. Almost on cue. The SUV hit a pothole. Madison immediately covered her mouth. Oh no! The driver looked into the rearview mirror. Seriously? She nodded miserably. I warned you. The convoy came to an abrupt stop several minutes later. One deeply frustrated bodyguard climbed out, carrying bottled water and motion sickness medication. Another muttered, I've protected senators. I've protected foreign diplomats. I've never had to stop a tactical convoy because the hostage was nauseous. Madison accepted the water with embarrassed gratitude. I'm really sorry. The guard scratched the back of his neck. It's okay. Then, almost involuntarily, he added, My daughter gets carsick too. Madison smiled. What grade? He blinked. Second. Tell her peppermint candies sometimes help. The guard nodded before realizing he had just accepted parenting advice from the woman they had kidnapped. Nearly an hour later, enormous iron gates opened. Beyond them stood the DeLuca estate. Madison expected something resembling an ancient castle. Instead, she found a breathtaking blend of old-world architecture and modern security. Elegant stone buildings surrounded carefully maintained gardens. Security cameras tracked every movement. Armed guards patrolled discreetly. Luxury and danger existed side by side. As she stepped from the SUV, dozens of employees paused to stare. Housekeepers, gardeners, kitchen staff, private security. No one spoke aloud, but whispers spread almost immediately. Who's she? New witness? Government negotiator? No. I heard she's the woman Boss risked everything to capture. Madison leaned toward the nearest guard. I wish someone would explain that to me. He almost smiled. Almost. Inside the mansion, Raffaele walked straight toward his private office. His chief advisor caught up with him. "We've confirmed Miss Brooks has absolutely no criminal record." "I assumed as much." "Elementary school employee." "I know. Volunteers every Saturday." Silence. "Organizes food drives." Another silence. "She once received an award for community service." Raffaele finally stopped walking. "What about family?" "Parents deceased. No siblings. Few close relatives. Financial situation? Stable. Modest. No unusual activity." The advisor hesitated before adding, "Boss. She's exactly who she says she is." Raffaele looked through the office window toward the front courtyard. Madison stood awkwardly between two heavily armed guards. She looked impossibly out of place. A cheerful woman, wearing comfortable sneakers, standing inside one of the most heavily protected mafia estates on the East Coast. He had built an empire by eliminating uncertainty. He trusted preparation, precision, information. Yet one mistake, one ordinary woman, threatened to unravel everything. Down in the courtyard, Madison looked up at the massive mansion, then quietly asked the nearest guard, "This may sound like a strange question." He waited. "But has anyone here eaten dinner yet?" The guard frowned. "What?" If everyone skipped lunch because of the shooting, she looked around at the exhausted faces surrounding her. "You're all probably starving." The guard simply stared. He had expected fear, anger, crying. Instead, the kidnapped woman seemed worried that her kidnappers hadn't eaten. He had absolutely no idea what to do with that information. The following morning, Madison woke, expecting to find bars on the windows. Instead, soft sunlight filtered through linen curtains. The bedroom was larger than her entire apartment. Fresh flowers sat on a polished wooden table. A tray holding coffee, fruit, and warm pastries rested nearby. For a long moment, she wondered if the previous night had been a stress-induced dream. Then she noticed the armed guard standing outside the open bedroom door. Right. Definitely not a dream. She slowly walked into the hallway. The guard straightened immediately. "Good morning, Miss Brooks." She gave him a confused smile. "Am I a prisoner?" He hesitated. "Technically, but you're serving breakfast. We were instructed to ensure you're comfortable." Madison blinked. "This is the nicest kidnapping in recorded history." The guard almost laughed. Almost. Meanwhile, the mansion was already awake. Security teams rotated shifts. Drivers prepared armored vehicles. Lawyers arrived carrying briefcases. Capos argued over shipping manifests and intelligence reports. Despite the wealth surrounding them, exhaustion hung over everyone. The kitchen was no exception. 3 cooks were shouting over one another. A dishwasher had broken overnight. Breakfast orders were delayed. Half the security detail had skipped dinner after the warehouse battle. Several guards simply grabbed candy bars from a vending machine before returning to patrol. Madison quietly watched the chaos from the doorway. She recognized the look instantly. She had seen it every Thanksgiving at Jefferson Elementary. Too many tasks. No clear system. Everyone working hard, but not together. One cook slammed a pan onto the counter. "We're out of eggs again. We ordered more. They're still on the delivery truck." No one updated the inventory. Madison couldn't stop herself. "Excuse me." Everyone turned. "If you're making scrambled eggs for that many people," she pointed toward several unopened boxes, "those cartons contain liquid eggs." The head cook frowned. "We save those." "For what?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I actually don't know." Madison smiled apologetically. "May I?" The cook looked toward the security cameras. Several guards shrugged. He stepped aside. Within minutes, Madison had organized the counters, separated ingredients by station, assigned one person to toast, another to hot food, another to drinks. She never raised her voice, never criticized anyone. She simply kept asking gentle questions. Who enjoys making omelets? You. Great. Stay there. Who's fastest at preparing fruit? You? Perfect. Can someone label these trays before they leave the kitchen? The shouting slowly disappeared. 20 minutes later, breakfast was flowing smoothly. The head cook stared in disbelief. I've worked here 11 years. She smiled. I've worked with third graders. I promise they're harder. Several kitchen employees burst into laughter. Across the mansion, guards began noticing something unusual. Their breakfasts arrived warm. Coffee was actually hot. Nobody had forgotten the night shift officers. Someone had even included handwritten labels. Night shift, gate security, medical team. One veteran guard opened his container. There was an extra cinnamon roll inside. Attached was a small handwritten note. Long night, eat both. He stared at it. Who did this? The hostage. He looked up. The hostage. Late that morning, Raffaele entered the operations room. The atmosphere felt different. Normally, conversations stopped the moment he entered. Today they did, but something else caught his attention. People looked awake. One guard actually looked well-rested. Impossible. He turned toward his chief advisor. Report. No incidents. The eastern docks are secure. Gallows movements remain under surveillance. Raffaele nodded, then frowned. Why does everyone seem happier? The advisor hesitated. We're still investigating. You need to investigate morale? It appears connected to Miss Brooks. Raffaele looked up. Explain. She reorganized the kitchen. Silence. And people ate breakfast. Another silence. Proper breakfast. Raffaele stared. The advisor continued carefully. Apparently, she also convinced the cooks to prepare meals according to patrol schedules instead of kitchen convenience. That's all? Mostly. And somehow my soldiers are smiling because of eggs? The advisor cleared his throat. Good eggs. Madison spent the afternoon wandering the mansion under escort. Everywhere she looked, she noticed tiny problems. A gardener struggling to move heavy pots alone. A secretary searching through piles of paperwork. Laundry carts blocking emergency exits. Nothing serious individually. Together, constant stress. She asked one maid, "How long have those boxes been there?" 3 months. Why? No one knows whose responsibility they are. Madison nodded thoughtfully. Happens everywhere. At the school, she had learned something simple. People rarely ignored problems because they were lazy. Usually, they believed someone else would eventually solve them. By evening, several guards found themselves eating dinner together instead of separately. One frowned. Didn't we always have enough tables? Another looked around. We did. So why didn't we use them? No one had an answer. Madison quietly did. She had simply moved the furniture. That night, Raffaele reviewed financial reports in his office. A knock interrupted him. Enter. His oldest capo stepped inside. There has been another development. If this concerns breakfast again. It does. Raffaele slowly lowered his pen. I'm listening. The maintenance crew voluntarily stayed 2 extra hours. Why? They wanted to finish repairs before tomorrow. They've never done that. I know. And? They said Miss Brooks thanked them. Silence. She thanked them? Individually. Raffaele leaned back. His empire employed hundreds. She paid them well. Rewarded loyalty. Demanded excellence. Yet somehow, one civilian had accomplished in a single day what years of discipline never had. People wanted to help because they felt appreciated. It made absolutely no sense. Or perhaps it made perfect sense. He simply had never considered it. Later that evening, Madison found herself standing alone on a balcony overlooking the estate gardens. She wrapped her cardigan tighter against the cool breeze. Footsteps approached behind her. She turned. Raffaele. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, he asked, "Why are you doing this?" She looked confused. Doing what? Helping? You owe us nothing. She looked out across the gardens. I know. Then why? Madison smiled softly. When people are tired, they make mistakes. When they're hungry, they argue. When they feel invisible, they stop caring. She glanced back toward the brightly lit mansion. I can't fix everything, but I know how to make tomorrow a little easier than today. Raffaele studied her face. No fear, no manipulation, no hidden agenda, only quiet sincerity. It was a language completely foreign to the world he had spent decades building. For the first time in years, the Ice King found himself without an immediate answer. Behind a nearby window, two young guards secretly watched the conversation. One whispered, "Is the boss having a normal conversation?" The other shook his head slowly. "I don't know, but I think the hostage is winning." A week passed. No one officially changed Madison's status. She was still, technically, a protected hostage. But somewhere between breakfast schedules, handwritten thank-you notes, and late-night conversations with exhausted staff, the word hostage had quietly disappeared. Now everyone simply called her Miss Brooks. Every morning, Raphael followed the exact same routine. He woke before sunrise, reviewed overnight security reports, spent 2 hours studying shipping routes, financial statements, and intelligence updates, ignored breakfast, drank black coffee, started meetings. It had been that way for nearly 20 years. On Monday morning, it changed. As he entered the conference room, he found something unexpected waiting beside his stack of documents: a neatly wrapped sandwich, a bottle of water, a small yellow sticky note. "You skipped breakfast yesterday. Please don't make it a habit." There was no signature. There didn't need to be. One capo cautiously watched the boss's expression. Another quietly prepared for someone to lose their job. Raphael picked up the sandwich, looked at it, set it aside. The meeting begins now. Everyone exhaled. The crisis had apparently passed. 30 minutes later, while discussing container inspections in New Jersey, Raphael absent-mindedly opened the wrapper and took a bite. No one dared mention it, but every person in the room noticed. By Wednesday, the sandwich returned. Different ingredients, another bottle of water, another note. "Coffee isn't breakfast." This time, Raphael frowned. "Who keeps entering my office?" No one answered. Finally, his chief of security admitted, "Miss Brooks." And nobody stopped her. "You told us she could move freely inside the residence." "I did not authorize." He stopped. Technically, he hadn't forbidden it either. The security chief carefully added, "She said you'd probably forget to eat again." Silence. Another capo quietly looked out the window to hide a smile. That afternoon, Madison was helping the housekeeping staff reorganize supply closets when two young guards approached. "Miss Brooks?" She turned. "Yes? We have a question." "Okay. Our boss," she nodded patiently, "hasn't taken a vacation in 11 years. She blinked. "Seriously?" The guards nodded together. "He sleeps about 4 hours. Sometimes less. He refuses birthdays. He ignores holidays." Madison stared. "Does he know that's unhealthy?" The guards exchanged glances. "We were hoping you could tell him." She laughed. "You want the kidnapped woman to lecture your mafia boss about work-life balance? You're the only person he doesn't immediately ignore." That evening, Raphael remained inside his office long after midnight. Financial reports covered the desk. Maps filled one wall. Security footage played silently across several monitors. A quiet knock interrupted him. "Come in." Madison entered carrying a tray. "Not dinner, just tea. Fresh fruit. Another sandwich." He looked at her. "I already ate." She raised one eyebrow. "When?" He paused. "Earlier." She looked around. "There are 3 untouched coffee cups." "Yes." 2 aspirin." "Yes." And exactly 0 dirty plates. Silence. She folded her arms. "You forgot again. I was busy. So are emergency room doctors. They still eat," he almost replied. Instead, he noticed she wasn't criticizing him. She sounded genuinely concerned. "I don't require supervision." "No." She smiled. "You require lunch." For the first time in years, one corner of Raffaele's mouth almost moved. Almost. Word spread quickly through the mansion. Miss Brooks had told the boss to eat, and survived. The next morning, the story somehow became even bigger. During a strategy meeting, Raphael had been staring intensely at satellite photographs, while everyone else waited for instructions. Without warning, Madison quietly entered the room. No one breathed. She walked directly toward the head of the table, placed a glass of water beside him, then whispered just loudly enough for everyone to hear, "You'd be much scarier if you looked less hungry." Silence. Absolute silence. One advisor accidentally dropped his pen. Another nearly choked, trying not to laugh. A younger soldier turned completely red. Everyone waited for the explosion. Raphael slowly looked up. Madison smiled innocently, then walked away. The heavy conference room doors closed behind her. No one moved. Finally, Raphael picked up the glass, drank the water, continued the meeting as though nothing unusual had happened. Across the table, 3 capos stared at one another in disbelief. One silently mouthed, "Did that actually happen?" Another nodded. "I think we're all still alive." Over the following days, small miracles continued. The boss began leaving his office for dinner. Not every night, but often enough for people to notice. He occasionally asked kitchen staff whether supplies were running low. He even thanked a mechanic after a difficult repair. The mechanic spent the rest of the week convinced he had imagined it. Madison, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware that she was slowly rewriting the culture of one of the most feared criminal organizations on the East Coast. To her, these weren't revolutionary changes. They were common courtesy. One afternoon, she found 2 guards arguing over patrol assignments. Instead of choosing sides, she asked, "When was the last time either of you had a day off?" The room became quiet. 3 weeks. 24 days. She frowned. "No wonder you're both grumpy." Later that evening, the revised schedule reached Raphael's desk. He studied it carefully. Patrol coverage had actually improved. Fatigue had decreased. No security gaps existed. He called his operations chief. "Who prepared this rotation?" "Miss Brooks. She's never managed armed security." "No." "Then how?" The chief smiled slightly. "She said organizing guards isn't very different from organizing lunch duty." For reasons he couldn't explain, that answer made perfect sense. One rainy evening, Madison found Raphael standing alone beneath the covered terrace overlooking the gardens. The rain fell steadily across the stone courtyard. Neither spoke for a while. Finally she asked, "Do you ever get tired?" He answered honestly, "Yes." "So why don't you rest?" "Because people depend on me." She nodded. "They depend on you tomorrow, too." He looked at her. "You think leadership is simple?" "No. I think people confuse being indispensable with being exhausted." The words lingered. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals, survived assassination attempts, outmaneuvered rival families. Yet somehow, a cafeteria manager had just challenged an idea he had believed his entire adult life. She stepped beside him. "You know something?" "What?" "When I first started working at the school, I thought the children needed perfect lunches." He listened. "But they didn't. They needed someone who cared enough to keep showing up." She smiled. "I think adults are exactly the same." For several long moments, only the sound of rain filled the silence. Behind the dining room windows, a handful of guards secretly watched. One whispered, "I think the boss is smiling." Another narrowed his eyes. "No." A third guard leaned closer to the glass. "Wait. He actually is." It wasn't a broad smile, barely more than the faintest softening around his eyes. But for the men who had followed Rafael de Luca through wars, betrayals, and bloodshed, it was something they had never expected to witness, and none of them realized that this quiet transformation was about to become the greatest weakness Vincent Gallo had ever hoped to exploit. Nearly 3 weeks after the failed warehouse operation, the De Luca estate had settled into an unfamiliar rhythm. The tension had not disappeared. The danger certainly hadn't. But something inside the mansion had changed. Security guards greeted kitchen staff by name. Housekeepers laughed during lunch. Mechanics no longer ate alone beside the garage. Even the oldest capos reluctantly admitted that morale had never been stronger. None of them credited better weapons or larger salaries. The credit belonged to one woman who still insisted she wasn't supposed to be there. Unfortunately, someone else had noticed. Hundreds of miles away, Vincent Gallo stood inside his private office, staring at surveillance photographs spread across a polished mahogany table. One photograph showed Madison speaking with gardeners. Another captured her delivering coffee to exhausted night shift guards. A third showed Raphael standing beside her on the mansion terrace. Vincent tapped that photograph. Again. An intelligence officer replayed drone footage. There was no embrace, no obvious affection, only a conversation. Yet Vincent smiled. Pause. The screen froze. Raphael had turned slightly toward Madison, not away, toward her. Vincent folded his hands. The Ice King never turns toward anyone. Silence filled the room. One advisor frowned. Perhaps she's simply a protected witness. Vincent shook his head. No. I've studied Raphael for 15 years. He protects assets. He doesn't listen to them. Another photograph appeared. Raphael accepting a bottle of water from Madison. No expression. No words. But he accepted it. Vincent chuckled. There. The room remained confused. There what? The weakness. Back at the De Luca estate, Madison had absolutely no idea she had become the subject of another mafia family's investigation. She was busy teaching 3 enormous bodyguards how to make homemade tomato soup. This isn't tactical. One guard looked horrified. It's vegetables. Exactly. Another soldier carefully chopped onions. I've disarmed explosives. I've never diced carrots. Madison laughed. Today is full of new experiences. Across the kitchen, Raphael paused outside the doorway. He watched in silence. 3 elite security officers, men feared throughout the East Coast, were arguing over the correct amount of garlic. One proudly held up a wooden spoon. I think I'm improving. The head chef nearly fainted. The piece ended the following afternoon. An armored convoy returning from the Eastern Docks radioed headquarters. Vehicle disabled. Repeat. Disabled. Ambush confirmed. Inside the command center, alarms immediately sounded. Capos rushed toward tactical stations. Large digital maps illuminated the walls. Raphael entered without running. He never ran. Report. 12 attackers. Professional. They ignored the cargo. What did they take? A long pause. The communications officer removed his headset slowly. They kidnapped 4 employees. The room froze. Who? 2 mechanics. 1 accountant. 1 kitchen assistant. Raphael's expression darkened. None of those people carried strategic value. Unless a secure phone rang. The communications officer answered. His face immediately drained of color. He handed the receiver to Raphael. It's Vincent. Raphael accepted the call. What do you want? Vincent sounded almost cheerful. I wanted to congratulate you. For what? I've finally discovered your favorite hostage. Silence. I have 4 innocent people. They'll remain perfectly healthy. For now, what are your terms? Simple. Trade Madison Brooks. The operations room became deathly quiet. Vincent continued. Bring her alone. You receive your employees. Refuse. Another pause. And every hour someone disappears forever. The line went dead. For several seconds, no one moved. Finally, one senior capo spoke. It's a trap. Obviously. We can't surrender Miss Brooks. No. Another advisor added. If Gallo learns she's emotionally important, he'll never stop using her. Raphael nodded once. Prepare a rescue operation. No negotiations. Orders immediately flew across the room. Snipers, reconnaissance teams, medical units, escape routes. Within minutes, the mansion transformed into a military headquarters. Everyone focused on one objective. Bring their people home. Except one person had overheard nearly everything. Madison stood unnoticed outside the partially open conference room door. She hadn't intended to listen. She had only come to ask whether anyone wanted dinner. Instead, she learned that 4 innocent employees had been kidnapped because of her. She quietly backed away before anyone saw her. Her hands trembled. The mechanic who always waved every morning. The shy accountant who collected mystery novels. The kitchen assistant who had taught her an old family pasta recipe. They weren't soldiers. They had families, children, parents waiting at home. She whispered to herself, this isn't fair. That evening, the mansion became unusually quiet. Weapons were cleaned, vehicles fueled, body armor distributed. Madison sat alone in the small library. She kept replaying Vincent's demand. Trade Madison. Save everyone. Simple, except... She knew Raphael would never agree. Not because he was stubborn, because he believed protecting people was his responsibility. She understood something he didn't. If she voluntarily surrendered, no one else would need to choose. Shortly after midnight, the rescue convoy departed through the front gates. Dozens of vehicles disappeared into the darkness. No one noticed a small delivery van leaving through the service entrance 15 minutes later. Inside sat Madison. Beside her was only one elderly groundskeeper. He had tried to stop her. She had smiled sadly. I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for directions. 40 minutes later, the rescue teams surrounded an abandoned riverside factory, identified as Gallo's temporary holding site. Raphael studied the building through binoculars. Thermal. Multiple heat signatures. Hostages alive. Snipers? At least 4. Before anyone could continue, one scout sprinted toward the command vehicle. Boss? What? We found another vehicle. What vehicle? The scout looked genuinely alarmed. Miss Brooks. Raphael turned so quickly that even his closest advisors hesitated. What about her? She came here. Every capo stared. Alone. Silence. Absolute silence. For perhaps the first time in his entire criminal career, Raphael De Luca completely lost his composure. What did you say? The scout pointed toward the factory. "She's already inside." Raphael didn't answer. He simply reached for his rifle and walked toward the entrance. The operation had instantly changed. It was no longer only about rescuing hostages. Now, the woman who had accidentally transformed his entire world had willingly walked into the hands of the most dangerous man on the East Coast. And for the first time, every capo following behind him understood something they had only whispered about until now. Their boss was no longer fighting merely to win a war. He was fighting to bring Madison Brooks home. The abandoned riverside factory echoed with the slow drip of water from rusted pipes. Broken machinery cast long shadows across the concrete floor. Vincent Gallo stood beside the captured employees with complete confidence. His men occupied every catwalk, every entrance, every elevated position. He wasn't expecting a negotiation. He was expecting victory. Madison stood several feet away with her hands raised. She had come voluntarily. Not because she believed she could outsmart criminals, but because she couldn't bear the thought of innocent people suffering because of her. Vincent studied her with open curiosity. "So, this is the famous Madison Brooks." She managed a nervous smile. "I'm afraid I'm considerably less famous than your people seem to think." He laughed. "I've heard quite a lot about you. I mostly organize lunch schedules. You also changed Raffaele De Luca." She blinked. "I don't think anyone can change another person." Vincent smiled coldly. "Then explain why the coldest man on the East Coast suddenly protects a cafeteria manager." Madison didn't answer because she wasn't sure she knew the answer herself. Outside the factory, the De Luca rescue teams silently moved into position. Snipers settled onto nearby rooftops. Medical units waited behind armored vehicles. Every radio remained silent. Raffaele studied the factory through a thermal scope. One bright silhouette stood apart from the others. Madison. She wasn't hiding. She was standing between Vincent and the frightened employees. His jaw tightened. One capo quietly asked, "Orders?" Raffaele never looked away. "Nobody fires until the hostages have cover." "And Miss Brooks?" Another long pause. "She comes home." There was no hesitation, no qualification. Every man present understood exactly what those three words meant. Inside. Vincent slowly circled Madison. "You had the opportunity to escape." "I know. You came here willingly." "Yes. Why?" She looked toward the frightened employees. "They have families. So do you." She smiled sadly. "Not really. I live alone. I work in a school. My students would miss me. But these people..." She glanced toward the mechanic from the estate. "Their children are waiting for them tonight." For the first time, even several of Vincent's own men exchanged uncertain looks. One quietly lowered his eyes. Madison wasn't bargaining for herself. She was bargaining for strangers. A sudden vibration interrupted the silence. One of Vincent's guards rushed forward. "Boss!" "What?" "Movement outside." Vincent smiled. "Excellent." He looked directly at Madison. "I told you he'd come." Before she could answer, the factory windows exploded inward. Flashbangs erupted simultaneously. Blinding white light filled the building. The thunderous concussion echoed through the factory. "Move!" De Luca soldiers poured through 3 separate entrances. Automatic gunfire erupted. Concrete shattered. Metal railings sparked. Hostages dropped to the floor. Madison instinctively covered the nearest kitchen assistant with her own body as bullets tore across the room above them. She squeezed her eyes shut. The battle became pure chaos. Raffaele advanced through the smoke with astonishing precision. Every movement remained controlled. Every shot deliberate. One attacker emerged from behind a conveyor belt. 2 shots. Down. Another appeared on the upper catwalk. A sniper eliminated him before he could fire. Capos pushed steadily forward. Within moments, Vincent's defensive line began collapsing. Realizing defeat was approaching, Vincent stepped backward toward an emergency exit. Then he saw Madison helping one of the hostages to safety. A cruel smile spread across his face. "If I can't keep my leverage..." He raised his pistol. "I'll destroy yours." Time seemed to slow. Several soldiers shouted, "Boss!" Madison turned. She saw the weapon, but she couldn't move quickly enough. Without thinking, Raffaele abandoned the concrete pillar that had been protecting him. He crossed the open floor, wrapped both arms around Madison, and shielded her with his own body. The gunshot echoed. The impact spun him sideways. Madison gasped. "Raffaele!" Before Vincent could fire again, 3 DeLuca marksmen struck simultaneously. His weapon flew from his hand. He collapsed to the ground as tactical teams rushed forward and secured the area. The battle was over. For several terrifying seconds, Madison could only stare. Raffaele remained standing. Barely. The bullet had struck his armored vest, knocking the breath from his lungs and bruising several ribs. She grabbed his shoulders. "You idiot!" Every capo froze. No one, absolutely no one, had ever called Raffaele DeLuca an idiot. Madison's eyes filled with tears. "You left cover. You could have died." He looked at her quietly. "Yes." "Why?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because I wasn't willing to lose you." Silence settled across the factory. Around them, veteran capos looked at one another in disbelief. For years they had followed a man who never revealed weakness. Now, he had declared it in front of everyone. Several weeks later, the DeLuca estate hosted the largest gathering of senior advisors in family history. The war with Vincent Gallo had ended. His organization had collapsed. Legitimate businesses were expanding. Security had stabilized. The atmosphere felt lighter than anyone could remember. Madison quietly stood near the back of the room, convinced she would finally be thanked and sent home. She had even packed her suitcase. Raffaele stepped before the assembled capos. His voice carried effortlessly through the hall. "For many years, I believed strength meant never making mistakes." He paused. "I was wrong." Every person listened. "The greatest mistake I ever made," he turned toward Madison, "was kidnapping the wrong woman." Soft laughter spread through the room. Madison covered her face, half embarrassed and half amused. Raffaele continued, "The greatest decision I ever made was refusing to let her leave." The room became completely silent. Madison blinked rapidly, trying not to cry. Finally, she laughed through her tears. "So, does this mean I'm officially unemployed as your hostage?" Even the sternest capos burst into laughter. For the first time in years, Raffaele smiled openly. "No. I was hoping you'd accept a promotion." She tilted her head. "To what?" He walked toward her. "My partner." The applause that followed shook the hall. Months later, the DeLuca Foundation announced its newest division, Community Programs. Madison Brooks accepted the position of director. Instead of managing only one elementary school cafeteria, she now oversaw nutrition initiatives, scholarships, employee family support, and charitable outreach funded entirely through the family's legitimate businesses. The mansion itself slowly changed. Children of employees played safely in the gardens. Family dinners became common. Birthdays were celebrated. Holiday meals filled the dining hall. The soldiers developed a running joke. If the boss is in a bad mood, give him to Miss Brooks. She'll feed him. One afternoon, a nervous new recruit quietly asked an older capo, "Is it true the boss kidnapped his own wife?" The veteran laughed so hard he nearly dropped his coffee. "No, he kidnapped the wrong woman, and somehow found the right future." Across the courtyard, Madison stood laughing, while Raffaele stubbornly attempted to help prepare lunch for the staff. Flour covered his expensive black shirt. Vegetables had somehow ended up on the floor. The kitchen staff struggled to hide their amusement. Madison gently took the wooden spoon from his hand. For a mafia boss, "You're hopeless in the kitchen." He leaned closer with a smile that only she ever saw. "Good. It gives me an excuse to keep needing you." She laughed. "So that's your strategy." It worked once. It did. Around them, employees smiled as they returned to work. The mansion that had once been known only for fear had become known for something far rarer: loyalty, kindness, hope, and every person who lived there understood the same simple truth. The most powerful change the DeLuca Empire had ever experienced